So this is the second part of my senior project. I'm doing the actual prosthetic part now. This is the exciting part. So I don't know if I'm going to do a gelatin or a liquid latex prosthetic. I can do either one. I think I'll start with gelatin, just why not? So let me show you my setup. I've got my filming camera. I've got a video reference available. This video is by Pink Stylist on YouTube. I reference his videos a lot for learning how to make gelatin prosthetics. I also have my creepy face cast handy. Cheez-Its, which I already ate most of, and water. I also have clay for building up the positive mold. Tissues if I do decide to do a liquid latex prosthetic. I also have here a bunch of extra stuff. Cotton balls to go along with tissues. It's the same sort of deal, but I'll explain that later. I have glycerin and the gelatin powder for making a gelatin prosthetic. I have plaster of Paris, some more of that because I will need it for making gelatin prosthetics. Obviously liquid latex if it becomes handy. Face paints, but that's for later on. I don't have any cream paints, so I just ran and got some face paints. Texturing tools for making like skin texture and pores and stuff like that. I picked up some pretty flesh colored acrylic paints because if I want to mix them in with the liquid latex or the gelatin to color it before it's done setting, that way I don't have to paint on top of it, and it might help with getting an even skin tone to match mine. So yeah, let's get started.
The first step here is sculpting. You want to sculpt with clay on the face cast the shape exactly how you want the prosthetic to look. I went with a nose because it's my first time doing this, and I figured that would be the most straightforward facial feature besides maybe a chin. There are two important things to remember when sculpting your piece. 1. Add little bits of clay at a time. It's just easier to work in small increments. 2. Make the place where the clay meets the plaster as smooth as possible. If you don't, the resulting prosthetic will have a visible edge, and nobody wants to see that. The more seamless that connection is, the thinner your edges will be when the prosthetic is applied.
So now I'm done with the molding part of the nose for the Pinocchio look that I'm going for. Pinocchio's nose, when I was molding it, I was envisioning this as like, okay, I'm gonna make it a wooden nose coming off of my face. But then I looked at pictures from the cartoon and it looks more like his skin. I mean, obviously Pinocchio is wooden all around, and I'm not going to cover my face in something that looks like wood because I don't think my body painting skills are that advanced yet. So my approach is going to be making this look like an extension of my skin. Once it starts to protrude, then I'll blend it so that it looks like wood at the end. But where it connects to my face is gonna look like skin. So my point is, I'm gonna use some skin texturing techniques that I'll show you with a sponge, some water, and the clay to make it look more like skin and not very slick gelatin. Here's a little demo on how I'm going to texture the skin of the nose right around the base over here. So where, right about from here to like there-ish, where it should still look like part of my real nose. I'm gonna smooth it out first with some water over my finger. I'm gonna take one of these little craft sponges. It looks like skin texture. I'm gonna go ahead and use that to try and recreate the texture on the clay. Press lightly on the wet clay that had a smooth surface with the sponge, just to give it some texture, give it some grab. That way it doesn't look so incredibly smooth and unrealistic. Let me see if I can zoom you in here. So that's what it looks like. It's a little rough, but I can smooth it out still with my finger. Just pat down some of those overdone lumps because we don't want to look like we have acne all over our nose.
The next step is to create a shallow, straight-edged barrier surrounding the sculpt. I had started moving on to this step when I realized, however, that I hadn't taken undercuts into account. Undercuts are places where the plaster used later on in this video can set underneath impressions on the face cast. For example, I almost forgot to take care of the space underneath the nostrils. If I had poured my plaster over my nose sculpt the way I had it before, the plaster would have set underneath the curve of the nostrils in the face cast and hardened there, resulting in a permanently stuck-on block of plaster over the entire thing. In order to avoid this, I went back and filled in the space under those curves with clay. Other places I'll have to watch out for are those two spaces under my lips and the nostril holes themselves. Then I went back and textured the new clay before going in and making the small barrier. Keep in mind that all the protruding clay will create negative space in the plaster mold. Therefore, the reason we make this little straight-edged wall around the sculpt is to create a space in the resulting inverted plaster mold that catches overflow from the gelatin.
In the absence of sculpting tools, because for some reason Walmart didn't have any, I assumed. So I'm waiting on my mom to check at Marshall's, but in the absence of those, I've been using my fingers and I've done pretty well. But I need them right about now when I'm sculpting the wall around my mold of a nose. I found this itty bitty flathead screwdriver and a plaque pick thing for your teeth. I just need to create a straight edge, so just another way you can use household items to function for other things.
I like to call this next step the Great Wall. On the outer edge of the little straight-edged barrier, I built up a wall of clay. Simple as that. The two most important things to remember when doing this are to make sure that the wall is taller than the sculpted clay feature, and to blend the outside edge flush against the face cast so no plaster leaks out the sides.
So I've done the clay stuff, now I'm going to mix some more plaster of Paris just like I did in the face casting video. Same stuff, same process. Basically, this goes inside of the big clay wall that we've made, and then that dries in there, and then that becomes our mold for the gelatin. So we've made a mold for the plaster of Paris, and then that plaster of Paris becomes a mold. So the clay ends up meaning nothing after the plaster of Paris is set. Now I'm going to do that. Alright, and here we go. I'm gonna pour a little bit, and once there's enough filling the bottom part, I'm going to use my finger to, actually I'm gonna use a Q-tip to wiggle out any air bubbles. Slowly pour in the rest of it, and then the other way to get rid of some of those air bubbles is to knock this against the table. It's getting kind of solidified already. You can see it's thickening up and it's goopy. So hopefully I shouldn't have to wait more than like an hour. So I'm just gonna let this sit. Also, all those little bubbles at the top are a good sign. That means when we banged the face cast against the table, it worked. So the air bubbles came up to the top. All right, so this has been sitting for about an hour and it's cool to the touch. So we're gonna go ahead and pry it off, and then it is still kind of soft, like if I scrape it under my nail, but if I scrape it, I can scrape some off really easily. So we're just gonna be really careful, and then we're gonna just let it set. But I don't want it to harden too much on the existing plaster.
The reason the plaster got stuck was because when I made the little straight-edged barrier, there were two spots where the plaster leaked underneath and got lodged in an undercut. Luckily, it was a minimal amount of plaster, so I could eventually separate it. However, there was a bit of damage to the face cast. A bit of the cupid's bow was messed up, and there's also a spot by the inner corner of my eye where some of the face cast got ripped off. The good news is that neither of those places are crucial to my project. It may compromise the precision of the edges of the gelatin prosthetic this time, but we'll have to see how that goes.
Plaster is already starting to set. I just splattered plaster in my hair and my face. The top is kind of evaporated. I can feel this plaster on my face. I'm done with the Alright. And it would help if I had scissors to open this. I got it. The plaster of Paris goes inside of this big clay wall. I'm looking at the viewfinder. I have extra. I did it again. Hello, self. Do you look good? Yes, you do. Now don't look at yourself. It's solidified, and I'm looking in the viewfinder again. Didn't measure out the right amount, but I think I did. I totally did. I did this right.